Welcome everyone, this is Brandon with Aquatek Water Conditioning, and I'd like to welcome you to our 5th annual pond water management seminar. Once again, we're doing it here with Jeremy from Pond Champs and Sanco Industries. For those of you who are new to us, the way we format it out is Jeremy's going to try to take you through kind of a step-by-step program of preventive maintenance, how to treat that certain weed or algae, and what the best application for you is. So, the first half an hour is kind of the explanation, then the last half an hour we'll kind of do some Q&A for the questions that came in. If we do not get to your answer on the questions, we'll try to reach out to you within the next couple weeks if we don't get to them during the seminar. So I'd like to thank Jeremy once again, and I'll kind of turn it over to him, and hope everybody enjoys the seminar.
All right. And first and foremost, you guys probably already know this by coming in Aquatek. You got your first round of treatments, and there are certain products you can use right away. Generally speaking, you want to get some stuff in the water to help block the light, and also get some materials in the water that help digest some of the nutrient load. And so that's what we're going to start with today. Behind me we've got several colors. I'll hold those up. But before we get to those, I do want to talk about our product that has a dual purpose. It's got both the blue and the natural pond cleaner in the same product, so it's a 2-for-1 shot. Some of you have already used it, I'm sure, this year. Pond Booster, great product for ponds that are generally under an acre in size. You get both the bacteria and you get the blue color in one shot. You don't have to get your hands blue twice. All right, so nice big advantage there. Just to get in there and do that. Talk louder?
Yeah.
All right, talk louder! Okay. One of the newer colors that we have this year. All right, this is a Sapphire Blue. This is one product that really, a lot of people are starting to make comments about, where you don't necessarily want a flat appearance to your pond, but you don't want it to look real brilliantly blue. So this is kind of a combo of black and blue together, and it's a very nice combination called Sapphire. That really helps enhance that light blocking ability of the blue without making it look too flat in appearance as the black dye does. So just to give you a heads up on that. Neat little product, you'll enjoy that. Ocean Blue is the same as always, about a yellow-green type of appearance, Caribbean in color. A lot of people like that color. Again, very effective with light blocking ability. You want to use these colorants again to help keep weeds under control. They do help with algae some, but for the most part, it's a type of thing to block the sunlight getting to the bottom of the pond where the weeds are most active. And of course, the highly acclaimed Crystal Blue, one of our favorite products of all time. Great product, looks good in the water. And most people just really are taken by the color. If the water is somewhat clear, it really makes a very royal blue color. Okay? If your water is kind of murky or muddy, it's going to have that kind of greenish cast to it. There's not much you can do about that. Just add this to the pond, and over time it'll flocculate out some of that debris. Also, there's different kinds of conditions as far as clarity in the pond. There's way too many things to talk about there in this session to attack turbidity and that kind of thing. So the main thing you need to know is, if the pond is not clear, it's actually better for you, because color, debris in the water, things like that block the light getting to the plants at the bottom of the pond. So it's not always best to have a clear watered pond, just so you know. Now it does help the Aquatek guys out with their filters though. So that gives you the information you needed for early season products and things like that. You also do want to add natural pond cleaner, which is in the Pond Booster product, which I mentioned at the beginning. So you have that combo with the Pond Booster, but even if you don't use that, if you're using just straight blue, straight black, straight sapphire, or straight ocean, you want to add the same amount of product with the natural pond cleaner at the same time. Those can all be applied over the ice. They can be either applied next to the shoreline, and you all know you don't apply the blue on the side where the wind is blowing at you, otherwise you're going to turn into a Smurf. And we love Smurfs, but you know, nobody wants to be a Smurf. So stay away from that. And remember, pour it in on the side where the wind is coming behind your back, so it blows out and across that pond. It doesn't take long for it to disperse, so it does a very nice job of taking across, just the wind takes it right across the top of the pond. Oftentimes though, you should expect in the wintertime that water temperature is going to cause it to sink. So don't be surprised if that color sinks a little bit and you don't get a huge color change for a couple days. All right, just a caution on that. I know we had a lot of phone calls this year about that. So keep in mind the color is mainly a substance that you want to put in that is going to help block that light, but it may take some time for that cold water to get that dispersion to the right level. On the other hand, natural pond cleaner sinks very rapidly to the bottom, and that's where it stays, begins building colonies of bacteria. They begin to digest that leaf debris, muck, twigs, even goose debris, stuff like that. So that's a very good product, again, for keeping your pond in at least a good start. It does not take care of all the problems, but it will get you to a good start here early in the spring. Okay? Now, what if we have algae out there? I know a lot of you have already seen algae. Most of you have probably already treated at least once. We have a product called Crystal Plex. That is the product that is a chelated copper. That is very useful in mixing into a sprayer with water. You can mix it with other chemicals to make them more effective. It's a good all-around algicide. Works on almost all the algae that are out there. And there's other forms of algae that can be treated with copper sulfate as well. That's the other type of algicide that we have. I just want to make sure we started out with this product because this is going to take care of all algae, whereas copper sulfate takes care of some algae. Okay? So remember that. If you're having problems controlling that algae, you probably might want to consider switching to this algicide because it's going to do a really good, clean job for you and works really well. Now we come to some other things as far as application. Okay, since we're talking about the copper products, I'm going to go ahead and talk about applicating them. When you are applying Crystal Plex, it's very simple because it's already a liquid. So with this product, you want to go ahead and pour it into a 2-gallon sprayer, 1-gallon sprayer, any size sprayer, it doesn't matter. What you want to do is you want to pay attention to how many gallons of the product you need on the size of pond you have. Now, in order for us to kind of get somewhere in this presentation, I don't want to take it and tell you the amount that you need for a 1/4 acre, or the amount that you need for 3 acre, or 6 acre, or anything like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and talk about a 1 acre size. From there, you can do the math and cut it in half, or cut it in a third, cut in quarters, whatever, or even 3 times, whatever it is. So basically everything I'm going to talk about today is going to be based on a 1 acre size. That keeps it simple and easy. So in order for everybody to kind of understand that, that's why I'm keeping it right at that level. The first thing you should consider is how big is the pond? So how much acre feet is there? Or how many 1,000 square foot is it? Okay? Most of you probably know this too. The 1 surface acre equals 45,000 square feet approximately. There's an exact number, but you don't need to know that for this. So basically 1 surface acre is 1 acre foot, if it's 1 foot deep. Most of your ponds are not just 1 foot deep. That would be considered probably a puddle. So we want to be a little bigger than that. So let's look at, an average depth of 4 feet. So very typically, if you call into Sanco, or Pond Champs, or even Aquatek, we're going to base our information based on an average of 4 feet, no matter what size it is, width-wise and dimensionally acreage-wise. Okay, so if we're looking at a 1 acre pond, 4 feet deep, we would need to apply at the labeled rate for Crystal Plex 4 gallons. Now, most of you are going to say, well, I only use 1 gallon because it says 1 gallon per acre foot. Yes, it's an acre foot. So you need to make sure you calculate, first of all, the acreage and then the feet deep average. All right? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So if I have a 1/4 acre pond with an average depth of 4 feet, then you would have a 1/4 acre in size, 4 feet deep would mean 1 gallon. Okay? And it'll be very effective inside that pond to use that amount. Now, if I use just 1 gallon on 1 acre that is 4 feet deep, it's not going to be near as effective. It will kill some of the algae, but it won't take care of the whole problem that's in that pond because it's not going to be enough part per million copper to be effective against the algae. All right, that's why I wanted to get this technical part kind of under wraps early, so you kind of get an idea of the dosage. So the copper, the crystal plex, you need to make sure you use enough. A lot of people underuse it and don't use enough. There's one exception to that rule. If you have grass carp, if you have koi, it's not good for you to use chelated coppers. That means Cutrine, crystal plex. There's other brands of types of algicides that are chelated coppers. They have a tendency to be very sensitive to those. So stay away from that if you have koi or any kind of goldfish, even white amur or what we call grass carp, are fish that are very sensitive to that type of copper. Copper sulfate, on the other hand, you can utilize in those ponds with those fish. You generally doesn't have a problem as long as you use it correctly. And remember, we always want you to use it according to the label. So, copper sulfate isn't quite as easy to use as crystal plex. Can be unfriendly to the user because depending on how you use it, it could be quite dusty. So you just want to be very cautious when you're applying that product to the pond. Generally speaking, if I'm advising people in their own personal ponds, I'm telling them to go ahead and use that copper sulfate by putting it in a 5-gallon bucket and mixing it with water, okay? And to get that to dissolve. And you want to get all of that copper to dissolve into a solution and then pour it into a sprayer and spray that into the pond over the algae. That's the most effective way. Now, being in the business of treating, we don't always do it maybe the most effective way, we do it the most efficient way. And so what we do is we actually use the dry product and cast that with a scoop in a bucket. We use about the same amount of copper as you would in the sprayer, but it takes us about half the time because we're not waiting for it to dissolve. So just up front, that's why we do it the way we do it. It's not because it's better. The most effective way is still to liquefy it, spray it over the algae, and you're going to get a much better kill. So be patient. You have time at home generally to get that dissolved. You also have warm water that you can use to dissolve it quickly. On big ponds, we do use our big spray pumps to mix the copper up in a big tank. And by doing that, we get a lot of agitation in there and it will dissolve it quickly, and then therefore we can treat larger bodies of water with that. So hopefully that gives you some idea of those two products and how they are used to attack algae. I think we're going to talk about the other two herbicides quickly, and then we got a little bonus footage for you as far as we have some pictures of problem weeds and problem algae that I want to show you, and we'll talk about that much more specifically, okay? This is the strategy we want to use for these type of products. So the next product we have is, and this is one that we get a lot of questions on, are cattails. Cattails, reeds, grasses, weeds in the rocks, stuff like that around the edge of the pond. Even some things as large as willow trees. We get maple trees this time of year because the seeds blow into the water and they get up on the bank and just start to launch. So what can I do to kill those? Well, we use a product called Catplex. It's similar to how it sounds, C-A-T-T, and then the word plex, P-L-E-X. That is available at Aquatek, and it works extremely well on emerged weeds, not on underwater weeds. So don't use it on your stuff that's growing under the water. It has to stick to the leaf, dry, and then be absorbed into the plant to kill the plant. So how do we use that? We use it about 3 to 4 ounces of concentrate mixed into a sprayer with about a gallon of water. And on top of that, we generally like to have some kind of surfactant mixed with that to help it stick to the leaf and dry there and then penetrate the leaf. And that product is called Plex Mate. And that's also available. It sits right on the shelf next to it. So both those products together will kill nearly every emergent weed out there. The few exceptions, there's one called Mare's Tail, and you guys have that in the area. That's actually, a scientific word is Equisetum, and that is a weed that actually has a very thick coating, even thicker than cattails. And the problem with that is, because it's so thick and it's so resistant to taking products down to the root system, it just will not phase it with this product. That's going to require the other product that I'm going to mention here in a moment for underwater weeds. Okay, and that is Tsunami Dq, and that's another product that we sell with Aquatek. We all have this as far as on the label that it is restricted for 24 hours after use. The Catplex has 0 restriction on it, so you can use that and drink the water without any problem. However, with Tsunami Dq, there's a 24-hour restriction on that. So make sure that if you have an Aquatek system, you don't use that water for 24 hours after applying this product. Now, when you're applying this product, again, it's very similar to everything else I've talked about. You put it in a sprayer and apply it to the water. We don't really have very many pour and go type products for pond weeds and algae. The pour and go is the early stages. All right, that's your colorants, your natural pond cleaners, and your muck doctor products. Those are the things that you can actually just throw in or drop in and not have to mix them at all. The other products for curatives type situations are going to require a little more work. Okay, so what kind of weeds can I kill underwater? Almost every underwater weed is susceptible to Tsunami Dq. It just depends on what kind of weed it is as to what type of strategy you have as far as the amount that you use. Okay, and because I have these nice little pictures, I'll be showing those in a second here. We do have a few weeds also inside a flat pack here. We'll pull those out and talk about them as well. So let's go ahead and let me think if we had anything I've missed as far as general application. I think we're okay. There's going to be some, like I said, very specific types of things I'm going to show you. If you have these, then listen closely, because these are going to answer your questions. First one I want to talk about, this one is, I don't know, how's this showing up? Pretty good?
I think so, yep.
Okay, this weed is not really a weed. This is an algae that looks like a weed. And if you can see that, it's called Cara or Chara. And basically, this is a real bristly type plant that grows underwater. They grow underwater, they can be out there pretty deep, and then they come right to the surface over time. This particular little guy looks like a problem. A lot of people don't like him if they're in the pond at first, but after we talk to you about it, you're going to want this plant in your water. This little algae actually is a purifier. If you have Chara in your water, it's going to stabilize that water column. It's going to absorb bad nutrient loads. It's going to also absorb any toxins that are in the water, making that water just crystal clear. So this little guy is a very charming little algae. If you have this in your beach area, though, it can be very uncomfortable on your feet. It won't scratch them or hurt them, but it feels funny. So if you want to control this, use Crystal Plex. Copper sulfate will not work on it. Crystal Plex will work at the applied rate of 1 gallon per acre foot. So remember that. Don't kill all of this, because in your pond, everything will grow. So you can kind of choose what's going to grow and what's not. This is a good choice to grow. All right? So remember this plant. Very nice little algae. Looks like an underwater weed. If you also pick it up and pull it out of the water, it will give off a garlicky odor. Okay? And it's also called skunkweed because of that. Good plant, just don't want it in huge amounts. Okay? Another algae, and I don't have a picture of it. We don't have anything in there. Another algae that's out there that you might want to target with Crystal Plex specifically is Planktonic Algae. That's called pea soup algae. it's going to be this film on top of the water, or it's going to be fragments of little tiny fragments inside the water that are dangling there. And when you apply that, you want to apply it at the same rate, 1 gallon per acre foot, and the copper sulfate won't hit that algae very well at all. So you want to use Crystoplex for Planktonic algae or pea soup algae. So that's the two algae that are kind of special treatment type. Now let's get to the weeds. A lot of you, I'm sure, brought samples of weeds in. Am I good right here? All right. This one is a great early season weed to see out there and to control. Curly leaf looks just like its name implies. We are not terribly creative in naming weeds out there in the aquatics industry. For some reason, we kind of just grab on to what they look like and say, hey, that looks like something that'd be interesting. Kind of almost like a lettuce. So if you see this floating on the surface, it usually gets up there on the surface. It's real crinkly. Looks like almost a very narrow leaf, but it's still broad enough to look like almost like just a very thin piece of lettuce out there. You can see it on here. That particular weed is very susceptible to Duckweed, which is a Tsunami Dq. This one you can actually use a little less of than the labeled rate would say 1 gallon per acre. But in this case, this weed doesn't take as much of that product to kill it. You can use about half that rate. So just a heads up on that. That's good news because it gets to save a little money if you see this guy. You also will do a great job of killing it very quickly. 1 shot a year will take care of it. So that's really nice. Oh, this one's a little bit of more of a problem. American pondweed is one that actually this little guy floats right on top of the water surface. When it's floating up there, it usually doesn't get overwhelming, but sometimes you guys will notice it growing around the perimeter and then it'll spread around the entire perimeter of the pond. And people get annoyed by that. It looks a little unsightly. Tsunami Dq also works on that. You don't have to use a surfactant. You can if you want, but for the most part, you got to remember, most of this weed, even if you see the leaf on top, is growing under the water. So you want it to sink down and hit the entire stem structure and the entire leaf structure under the water as well. So that one's going to need to be a full dose, and you're going to have to do it frequently for several weeks to get good control of this. But once you put in the time, it will clean up fairly quickly for you. Okay, but that's not going to be like the curly leaf. Curly leaf, 1 shot and you're done. This type of weed is going to take several consecutive treatments. I'd say probably 3 to 4 during the season to get it under control and to start to eliminate that if you need to. There's not a lot of purpose to it as far as it does provide some cover for fish and frogs. So if you can tolerate it, it's not a bad thing to have in there. It will not cover the entire pond. Okay. This is another early season weed. This one will become dense and will cause problems. It's called Eurasian water milfoil. We have some native milfoils out there also. Their strategy is to grow from the bottom, come to the top, and then canvas the top and eliminate the competition. So they're an aggressive weed. These look like almost like raccoon tails in the water. They are, very big leaves, and they're world shaped around them. Look like a bottle brush. So if you see this weed, this one's one of the tougher ones to hit. It takes a little more tsunami to get control of this type of weed. Generally speaking, you can go with the 1 gallon per acre dose. If that doesn't work though, you need to bump it up to 1.5 to 2 gallons per acre foot. So it may take a little more intense treatments. Generally speaking, 2 treatments a year will get this under control. If you don't hit it strong enough the first time, it may take 3. So that just gives you a kind of a heads up on that. This is one of the tougher ones to get. All right, these two oftentimes appear together. All right, we have one called Duckweed, and I've got the little sample back here. I'll hold that up in a second here. But Duckweed is a little weed that floats on top of the water. Generally doesn't have a lot of roots. There are roots on some of the larger types. It's a very a lot of people like it in their aquariums. That's kind of where a lot of people put it in, or garden ponds. It does a real nice job of growing in stagnant water. Its little brother is called water meal, and it's much, much smaller than the duckweed. Nearly microscopic, as you can see on the hand here. It's a real tiny little grain of green. Both of these take the same strategy to control. So duckweed or water meal take the same strategy. You want to apply your product, which is Tsunami Dq, in the same rate we talked about before, 1 gallon per acre. Now, oftentimes this is not going to have 1 acre coverage. All right, it's going to be a portion of the pond that's going to have this on it. What you're going to want to do is mix your rate, get your gallon sprayer out, or 2 gallon sprayer out. You want to wait for a nice windy day when it blows all this in one corner, and then you can apply it right over the top of these little guys. Now, the big thing is make sure it does not rain for 1 day after you do that. It needs 24 hours to soak that weed good with the Tsunami Dq to kill it. If you do those 2 things, you will get control of this rather quickly. It will work well. You need to watch those temperatures with weeds as well. We've had a very slow season this year because those water temps are just not getting above the 60-degree mark. Tsunami Dq works best above 60 to about 70 degrees. So if you have had some failures on the chemical at this point, it's probably due to the water temperatures. And it's not the chemical at all that has an issue. It's when you put that in the cold water, the plant isn't growing. Okay? That cold water is causing the plant to slow down. So it's not going to pick up and grow near as aggressively in colder temperatures. We have to have it growing aggressively for these products to be utilized like a nutrient to the plant. And that's why they don't work. It's the plant is not resistant. It's just not growing fast enough to absorb the product and utilize it in the way it should. Okay? So just a heads up on that. These guys are very temperature sensitive. You should not be applying on them yet. In fact, I think most weeds in this area probably are not successfully being controlled yet. It's going to take some time. Once those waters warm up, though, we'll be in pretty good shape. Okay, I think we're halfway point. Let me grab a couple samples here. Let's see if we can get some of that water meal duckweed here. Yeah, it's not good. Kind of runs away from me. We'll go with something a little bigger. Okay, here's a nice sample of that's a weed. This one, kind of cool looking weed. It's this is called large leaf pondweed. It looks kind of like what I showed you in the picture of the curly leaf, and it kind of looks a little bit like the American pondweed, but it's neither one of those because guess what? This grows almost entirely underwater. So it's like a bush that comes up underwater. When it hits the surface, it doesn't have a lot of floating leaves with it. Usually not a huge problem. We got this sample out of one of our local lakes, so it's not necessarily that's a problem, but it's kind of an interesting big leaf thing that you see floating out there, and a lot of people get freaked out when they see big leaves. So let's see if we got some other little guys in here. Hopefully you got some small leaf. That looks like you did. This one's really hard to see. One of the most common weeds out there. All right, this weed, and I don't know if you can see it real well or not. We'll back it up to my shirt here and see if it shows up. But the way you can tell some of these weeds is what is a leaf versus what's a stem, okay? And then you got to decide whether it's opposite or if it's alternating or anything like that. And this little guy, as you can see, he's got a stem. This part right here is the stem going up and down. And each one of these little spiny things that are coming off of it, they're about an inch or so long. They are, those are the leaves. They look just like the stem, don't they? So a lot of people say, oh, it's just like a grass growing under the water because that's what it looks like. But these things are quite a bit more complex than what you'd think. And they do have vascular tissue. They move stuff up and down these stems all the time. The leaves are used just like they are for weeds in the garden. They soak in the sun and they grow like crazy. So that's one of our most common weeds ever. Small leaf pondweed, 1 gallon of Tsunami Dq with 1 gallon of water. Spray that per acre. Okay. That's about it with that. Now, do we have any questions? I've got the questions, the old
Yeah,
ones.
we had a couple
Yep.
come in too.
Got a
We just
couple?
had a couple new ones come in too.
Good. So you want me to handle this one first?
Yep.
Okay, this one, a person emailed in and they said, "Good morning, we have algae starting a pond. It looks light green and fuzzy on the rocks." Okay, and in this case, somebody told them not to use the Q-Trine Plus on it until it gets above 65 degrees. But they want to attack it earlier than that. I will tell you what, if you have algae growing on the rocks underwater, you can actually use copper sulfate. Oh yeah, probably a good thing, huh? My hands aren't too dirty. It's just a little blue stain from today. What you have with copper sulfate and crystallplex, you can use both of those actually at 40 to 45 degrees, believe it or not. They can be effective at that rate because algae is still growing at 40 degrees. All right, a lot of people don't know that. But algae is much more aggressive than weeds. So if you have algae in your pond, you can get a pretty early start on it. And you can have very good success. We have cleaned up all of our ponds out there that we treat from the early algae season, and it came on really early this year. We have had a lot of algae blooms out there, and we've got all of our ponds, I think almost 100% of them, are completely under control with the algae. Okay, we're starting to get weeds and duckweed and everything like that. Of course, cattails. But the algae can be treated early. You can go pretty early, about 40, 45 degrees. If you pick a good sunny day, it's not going to make a lot of difference. Okay, so that's 65 degrees. I'm not sure if that's specific to Q-Trine Plus. If it is, then you got to follow the label on that. However, with our products, it's at 40, 45 degrees for algae. So great news there for you. This one is, we just had our pond emptied and redug in 2019. Still new to learning how to take care of a new pond. Thank you for any help that you give us. And that was the closing remarks they had for that one. This one is asking, what's the best product to use around the pond edge for weed control? You already know the answer to that. Catplex. Yep. So Catplex works best, and the only weed that really, there's a couple families, but the mare's tail is the one that's most popular. That's a reed that grows, I would say, it grows about as tall as a sheet of paper, about 12 inches or so tall. Can be much taller, but in most people's beach areas, it's shorter than that. Starts out much shorter. Looks like a straw, a green straw sticking straight up. There's another form of that plant that looks like a tiny little pine tree. Okay? Both of those are controlled by Tsunami Dq. You don't have to go very strong. About 4 to 6 ounces per gallon of mix to spray those. And it works very, very well to control those two specific type of examples. Mare's tail, and there's 2 different families within mare's tail that it controls. If you need more heads up on that, just call Aquatek or us. We'll kind of guide you through that. Chances are, if you're out there spraying the Catplex and you don't get great results, it's probably mare's tail. All right, that's it. For those 2, what do we got next?
Okay, we've got a picture here. Is that
Okay.
muck or algae?
Okay, we got a picture here, and the picture, it's kind of unclear, but it looks like what they're showing me is the stuff that is on their rocks. Okay, now,
If I can-
if there's something on the rocks, is it looking pretty good?
It's all right.
You notice how the water's kind of clear. It's pretty clear. Has kind of a bluish tint to it. There are several algae families that grow right on the rocks. This is probably one of the most common things I've heard. Can we get rid of that? In reality, probably not. Okay? If it stays on the rocks, then we consider that not a problem. If it's breaking off and coming to the surface, that's when we have to deal with it. those type of algae are basically your most, shall we say, algae that is probably your weakest algae. I know it seems like it's not, but really it is. And what happened is you've controlled all the algae that are out competing that, and now that little guy is taken over because you've taken out the kingpins of the algae. Chara, there's Pathophora Spirogyra. Those are big, thick, mat-forming algae. They outcompete these little guys. They're called diatoms. There are also types of algae that are called oscillatoria and that entire family. Those are very thin, mat-forming algae that grows on rocks on the bottom of the pond. And they form little tiny sheets. They break free. They come up and they cause people a lot of grief. Best thing to do with them is to get that color in early, get it shaded out pretty good, get aggressive with the copper, get up to that 10 pounds per acre amount, and make sure you target it very specifically on that algae. You want to hit it with the product right on top of it and hit it hard. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to get rid of it. It means it will kill it. So it's not going to spread anymore, but it'll probably cling to those rocks until it breaks down. They have very thick mucus linings. It takes a long time for any kind of bacteria to break them down. So be patient. You're likely just going to have to live with it or break it off and kind of collect it and get it out of there. It's one of those things that there's just not a good cure for that. All right. Even for us as professionals, we have to manage our customers' expectations on that. So if your water is looking like that and it's looking that clean and good, I wouldn't worry too much about trying to go after something that's growing on the rocks. Now, if it's getting real thick on the rocks and starts to get real bright green, those algae are ones that are going to become overwhelming. They're the ones that are going to break free, come up, and then clog up the system, get on the beach or get on the kids, make the dogs smell funny, that kind of thing. So you want to watch out for those. One precaution, I guess I should say, is we do have an algae out there called blue-green. Most of you have heard of that. Not that common in ponds, believe it or not. They really overplay it in the media. That's more of a planktonic or pea soup type algae. So just a caution, if you got pea soup type algae, it's very likely that you have planktonic algae, okay? And one of the families within that type of algae is blue-green. Just to be aware of that. Got another one?
Yep, another question right there.
All right, we have a 3/4 acre pond around 20 feet deep, so that probably means 20 feet in the deepest part. Since it's our drinking water, we try to use chemicals sparingly, which is wise. How impactful is an aerator in keeping the pond clean? Does it even out the temperature since it circulates the water? A very good question and exactly right. It does even out the temperatures, thank you. The aerator will bubble from the bottom, so it's therefore going to take that water from the bottom and circulate it up. And oftentimes if you run an aerator in the winter, you'll notice a big hole in the ice. That's because that bottom water is actually warmer than the top water. In a pond, especially 20 feet deep, people probably think, oh, it's always cold at the bottom of the pond. Keep in mind, caves have a very stable temperature, about 55 to 60 degrees. That's going to be pretty much where you're at down at the bottom of the pond. It's going to stay somewhere around that 40, 45 degrees all winter long. And so therefore that's above freezing, and so every time you circulate it up and out, it's going to melt that ice off. It's very good for the pond in two ways. First of all, it circulates the water, so you get rid of thermocline. Secondly, it oxygenates the water. Okay? Every time you're turning the water over and making contact with the oxygen above it, it's going to cause it to absorb oxygen molecules. Not only that, as the bubbles are down there being injected into the water, they're also going to inject the water full of oxygen. Your dissolved oxygen content is going to rise, and your fish will thrive. So I'm fully supportive of aerators. They're great devices. Fountains are a little less effective. However, they're really pretty. So it just kind of depends on what your objectives are. If you're a fishing pond, you want to get an aerator. If you're one that wants the pond to look beautiful and have a nice display in it, a fountain's a great thing, a great way to go with that. Okay, any others?
Yeah, one other question. What about a newly dug pond, a brand new pond? What do you recommend for new ponds?
New ponds. New ponds are not going to have the nutrient load to grow a lot of algae. They're not going to have the nutrient load generally to get a lot of weed growth started. So your first year, you should really concentrate on getting some color in that water. Okay, the other thing you want to do is you probably want to start introducing natural pond cleaner. That will get that favorable bacteria started in the pond. It may or may not have anything to eat, so it's not going to hurt anything. They're friendly towards wildlife, humans, everything else. The only thing to eat is dead carbon that they find at the bottom of the pond. So those two things are very important in a pond that's brand new. The other thing you want to do is you want to keep an eye out for any algae that's starting and get on top of it early. Okay? If you wait and let these things build mats, then you go kill it, it's going to start building muck up. Okay? The other thing that you want to do is you want to watch those edges. Cattails, believe it or not, become very quick invasive species. A lot of people love them at first. They plant them. Oh, look at that nice little clump of cattails. And then the next year, the entire pond is surrounded in cattails. So you don't want that to happen. It's much harder to get them under control if you get them out of control quickly. So stay on top of that vegetation. Start spraying those weeds that are in the stones early, and things will go much more pleasurable for you as far as that new pond.
The Tsunami Dq, the 24-hour, is that just drinking or just using all?
That's any.
Okay.
Irrigation, drinking, animals, everything, requirement of 24 hours. Unfortunately, all herbicides have a restriction on them as far as the underwater herbicides for water use for drinking, except for just a very few, and they're very expensive. I'm thinking of, I think Sonar does not have a drinking restriction. It does have irrigation restrictions because you put that on your lawn, yeah, it'll turn them all white. So you don't want your lawn to go white. So basically, follow the label with restrictions regarding drinking water. And Tsunamis is very clearly stated on their 24-hour restriction. Okay? Yeah, you do not, the crystallplex, the copper sulfate, those are completely fine for human consumption, human swimming, and animal consumption. Don't let your sheep or goats get a hold of raw copper or raw crystallplex because they are very copper sensitive. If you're applying it to a water source, though, it won't hurt the sheep or goats in a pond. It's just too low a part per million. Okay.
What about decorative ponds, much smaller ponds? Is there a good application or product for that, or not so much?
Decorative ponds have two things in them, generally speaking, that really help them out. Number one is a pump, okay, and number two is a filter. So if you've got a mechanical filter in your little decorative pond and you have a pump driving it, then you're going to get a lot of that debris and stuff out of the water. So generally speaking, that helps with underwater weeds. You also have a liner, makes it really tough for weeds to get started. However, algae like to grow anywhere water is. They don't require a lot of nutrients. They like them if they can get them. But if you have a pond that is a decorative pond, you're still going to get that layer that we saw in the rocks, where you get that fundamental type of algae that's very, very, like I said, this is your least competitive algae. It just has a good environment to grow in. I have a lot of people that have a liner in their big pond as well. And they ask me, well, how do I get rid of that brown film that's on there? Well, you're not. It's a calcified layer that happens when the algae form. Then they build a calcium layer on there as well as mucus. And when you kill it, it just stays brown. It just doesn't go anywhere because it's basically stuck on there and you have to scrub it to get it off. So your basic maintenance on a smaller decorative pond is keep that filter clean, keep changing it out, and add maybe a couple other things to it. A biological filter, okay? Those are nothing more than little balls that have heavy surface areas so the bacteria can grow on them. Add some bacteria to the pond, it will help digest those nutrient loads. And then add a UV light, okay? Underwater light. And as that goes through the system, it'll go through there after the filter and before it comes out the other side. That will sterilize the water, kill any algae that's in there. It'll kill all the bacteria too that go through there. Most bacteria don't move around a lot, so it's not going to probably harm your. Just don't pour your bacteria in right next to the UV light. That's a poor idea. They will die from that. Okay, yeah, that's not a good idea. So as long as you're not introducing the bacteria directly to the UV light, they'll be fine. Okay, but that was a good question. There's a lot of decorative ponds out there.
All right.
Okay.
So I'd like to thank everybody for watching the pond seminar. If you missed something or you want to go back and revisit anything that Jeremy said today, we are going to be linking this to our website, onto our Facebook page, and also onto our YouTube channel, I believe. So if you want to go back and revisit some things, or just kind of brush up on what he said, you can go back and revisit that. If you watched this today and you thought, hey, I have a friend that could benefit from this, you can send them over that way to get a lot of good information. All the products that Jeremy talked about, we all carry in the store, so you can come in to get those. We also have most of them on our website. You can order online to get them there. So hope everybody enjoyed that. I want to thank Jeremy again for all the great information. I really look forward to this every year. And we learn something new every year because there's a different algae or different weed that people are dealing with.
Oh, I'm still learning.
Yeah, exactly. So I really, really enjoy this every year, doing this every year. So thank you to everyone that watched, and hopefully learned a lot of good lessons. Thank you.